Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. And me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. So it'll be interesting to see what the mic is going to pick up, but it should. The thing is a quarter of an inch from the microphone.
Good. Should be working fine, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so what's on your mind?
So I've been reading a lot lately, and my reading, I've noticed the past couple months has been much more fruitful since reading Edward De Bono's Six Thinking Hats.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. At first, when I read it, I didn't quite get its usefulness other than, okay, look at things from multiple perspectives, which is a piece of advice people give all the time. But his specific formulation as a mental model, the way it actually was presented, I guess, planted its roots, and I've been doing a lot more work in the way I've been reading things from, dense psychological texts to just being on Twitter, being able to actually look at things from multiple perspectives. It's been a very useful mental model.
It is. I recommend it highly to anybody that has to think about decisions that have been made or might be made. So good.
Yeah. And the wonderful thing is that I first took it as it was presented by Edward De Bono. He gives 6 hats, which are of different varieties. Think about it emotionally, think about it analytically, think about it critically, whichever way. And I've realized that his hats can be transposed to other methods of thinking when you're looking at something. Like you could read something from somebody and be like, all right, what if this is given from the perspective that this person is a genius in the realm that I care about? Or what if this person is actually very uninformed and doesn't know what they're talking about? Does that change the perspective? So it's been very useful, and I'm curious more about either his mental models or other mental models that you have found very useful.
Okay, good. Good question. Let me give Andrew a mic in case he wants to speak. Welcome, Andrew. We're discussing mental models of the mind. And the one on the table today is primarily De Bono. But, as you can imagine, there's been a very long history of mental models. But for the sake of brevity, let's just start at the beginning of the last century, where Sigmund Freud basically developed a hydraulic model of the mind. And so we should be fairly familiar with that. The repressed ideation, it creates pressure down in the unconscious, and then that, if it builds up enough, it'll break through or it'll create symptoms. It's basically a hydraulic model. And then if we look now, we have basically a computer model where things are logic gates and neural nets and so on and so forth. And we can go down to either one of those. It'd be very, very fruitful. There's many different models, but the one I want to focus on today, since you brought it up, is the most extraordinary model I've seen of them all, because it's not very technical, it's not very exotic, but it's very, very practical and it's easy to visualize. So here, let me see if I can deliver it. Imagine a cookie sheet that's about 2.5 feet wide and about 14 inches deep. And into this cookie sheet, we put a layer of mud, maybe 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch thick mud. It's still liquidy, but you can coat the bottom of this cookie sheet with this kind of gummy mud. And then what we do is we take an eyedropper and we drop a drop randomly on the tops. Okay, no, we lift the cookie sheet up to where it's cantilevered at about, let's say, about a 40-degree angle. So there's a slope now. There's a cookie sheet that's elevated on one side. It's coated in this mud, and it creates this fairly gentle slope. And then on the edge that's elevated, we take an eyedropper and we just drop a drop randomly up at the top. And of course, what happens is that drop comes down that surface, and it's no big deal. So now we do another drop, and we do another drop, and then you can imagine that these drops, which are placed randomly, will form, maybe 4 or 5 ruts into the mud. because they'll start joining each other as they come down the slope. Then, as you keep adding drops, you notice that the drops do not form new ruts anymore. They invariably go down the ruts that are already there. And so if you want that thing to work otherwise, you're going to have to impact it otherwise or design it otherwise. And so what I liked about this model is it's a very simple illustration. You know, it's a metaphor, an analogy or whatever, a simile. I don't know which it is. Maybe you guys can help me with that. We tend to think in the same patterns over and over and over. And the longer we do it, the more likely we are to get into thinking that is just narrow and it's roads that have already been traveled before by others and ourselves. And we have to combat this. If you don't combat this feature or bug, basically that's what you're stuck with. So does that make any sense, first of all? And secondly, are there any questions? And third, I apologize, I haven't done a very good job of presenting it. But one of the reasons I present it is because in a book that's gone out of print, unlikely to come back into print, and I think that this idea by De Bono is really quite useful for teaching kids or adults about conditioned thinking. So I'll stop there and take questions or comments.
That does make sense. Now I'm trying to extend the analogy or simile or whatever it is to see what the equivalent in real life is to thinking differently for this specific analogy. So if you're dropping eye drops at a cantilevered cookie sheet with the mud and it creates those ruts, then presumably what you need to do next is can create a completely different way of making new ruts, which is either a new method, a different, like cantilevering the actual thing itself to a different formation, or starting from scratch, replacing the mud.
Well, I don't think you can. I don't think you can.
Like
I don't think you can.
Extensions, probably, maybe, correct?
No, I think it's a good question, but I don't think you can extend the metaphor beyond a certain point, right? It's not really. I haven't really thought about it. What would it take for it to start learning? But what we can see for sure is that unless we do something radically different, like a jolt from the outside, which the Sufis are always talking about, unless you have some kind of randomish jolt from the outside of the system, you're going to stay in those ruts. Do you see what I'm saying? And this is borne out by our psychological observations. So there's a question, how do you get out of those ruts? Because that's a different question. And one that De Bono does address. And he has many different methods for doing that. But the point that I wanted to get across on the record and in the AI is that there is this model of mind. It's very simple, and it shows. It's basically Hebbian learning, right? Do you know who Hebbs is, Alexo? Hebbs was a guy who discovered that neurons that fire together wire together, right? So if you believed your whole life that there's only two religions, Protestantism and Catholicism, you could live your whole life thinking that that was your only choice. I mean, that was the only choice there was to make for you, so on and so forth. But that would be silly because there's so much more world out there. Is that making any sense? All right, let me try it again. So if you look...
Doctor, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. Did that make any sense? Oh, did anybody hear anything that I just said? Hello?
Yeah. Did you say anything after what you originally said, or were you responding to what I said?
I responded to what you said. So I apologize. This.
Oh, I haven't heard anything for the past probably minute or so.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so what I was going to say was that. All right, here we go. The model can only be extended, so far, but it can be extended this far. That unless we do something to jolt the human brain out of its current mechanistic thinking, its current conditioned thinking, its current ways of framing our problems. For example, we think about abortion, we think about the war, we think about climate, we think about infrastructure. And if you ask people on both sides, I bet you'd get a very small range of possibilities there. It's because our brains are not wired to be creative beyond a certain point and to be creative beyond a certain foreseeable necessity or something like that. And so what I'm trying to get across is that, look, folks, we are so deeply conditioned, we can't think straight. We are so deeply conditioned, we have no way of really apprehending our true situation, our circumstances as sentient beings on this planet. What the hell are we doing here? Why are we here? So on and so forth. All of these seems like crazy esoteric questions, but they're really not. What makes them seem that way is that our brains are limited, very limited. I'll stop there.
Could we do a specific example? Because so people will often say, "Hey, we got to look at this thing from a new light," but it's much easier said than done. Take your average political discussion, whether it's abortion, whether it's some kind of rights, whether it's war, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I think the conventional Western or perhaps global method of thinking is cost-benefit analysis. What are the pros? What are the cons? Which ones do I care about? Which ones do I weigh more? And then people just go ahead with whatever their prior conditioning is or whatever they happen to weigh more at that point in their life, and then they come out on the other side of the balance sheet with, well, okay, this is the thing I support, this is the thing I don't support. When you say that it's necessary to question our conditioning because we end up in the same ruts with a question like this or a discussion like that.
Or they say few ruts.
So, yeah. So then, is it the nature of doing this pros and cons thing, which basically all people do for these kinds of discussions, that needs to be looked at differently? This
would point, okay, the pros and cons, that'd be evaluating the anticipated outcomes for a particular course of action, right?
Yeah.
What this is proximal to that. I'm trying to get people to realize that the options that they come up with are already in those ruts. So the pros and cons is just choosing between one of four ruts, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas in reality, there's 20 different options, but we just can't see the others because we've already assumed that they're either outdated, they won't work, they're a pie in the sky, or they're too nihilistic or too optimistic or something like that. So my point is that we're not using our brains entirely because we're just sticking down these ruts. I mean, we can see this in any field. Look at philosophy. Look at mathematics. Look at string theory, for example. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But how long are we going to keep vibrating down that rut before we say, hey, we really haven't accomplished anything, and it doesn't look like we're going to? And there's many examples: political examples, scientific examples, social examples. And so I offer it. I don't know, Andrew. Does this seem to make any sense to you as a model of mind? Oh, I may have interrupted him doing something else. That's okay. He doesn't have to speak. So, can you give me another example, or give me another example, Lex, and I'll try to flesh it out some more.
Well, for one, is your pie in the sky thing. Edward De Bono gave an example where I think it was Uber, and he said that started out. The specific prompt was, what if everybody in the world was a taxi driver? Which sounds asinine.
Right.
But then
good.
But then you carve out the realistic thing that wasn't already a rut from this seemingly asinine suggestion.
Well, wait a minute. That suggestion seems exactly on target. That's what Elon's doing, right? He's making robo-taxis where anybody can buy a Model 3 and everybody can rent their car out whenever they're not using it, and the thing turns into a $100,000 a year profit center. And so that's precisely it. You go, oh yeah, that's brilliant. But I think De Bono was long before Uber, right?
Right. Well, I don't know when he.
Yeah, it was long before Uber. Yeah. So at any rate, but that's perfect. So people are going, okay, well, we need more cabs, we need more lines, we need cheaper fuel, we need this and that. and we need to get some kind of system where people can set out. And then someone says, no, well, why don't we just make everybody a cab driver? And they go, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. And you say, no, we could do that because we're going to have autonomous cars, and then people just loan out their cars to other people. It won't be so much a personal piece of property, but an income-generating investment for them. And so everybody's got their Model 3 with a self-driving, and they just everybody's a cab driver now. Do you see how that's crazy, but it's not crazy?
Right. So then I guess the admonition here would be, or not an admonition, but like the suggestion for this would be, don't be quick to rule out.
Absolutely, yes, that's it. And sometimes as a provocation, okay, so we know that the brain does best when it has random impacts that shake it out of its ruts and help it, create, right? Or to think outside the rut. Think outside the rut. Uh-huh. So we can facilitate. We can help our own thinking by doing this deliberately. And so one of the things that a couple of other things that De Bono, who by the way is a highly, highly paid business consultant, and I mean he's mega rich and has redone education systems in Venezuela and invented the new kind of insurance, the living insurance policy. So I'm not talking about some fly-by-night new ager. I'm talking about a guy who's very, very substantial and charged a fortune to consult. Anyway, so he would use these things called provocations, and in which they would deliberately take a group of people that are thinking, and they say, okay, well, we're not going anywhere here. So they introduce something called a PO. And a PO would be something like all cars should have square wheels. Or alternatively, all cars should be painted the same color. What are the pros and cons of that? Right? What are the pros and cons of all cars being painted the same color? I'm just going to ask the group right now. Pros and cons of all cars being, say, white, or all cars being black. Well, we would save money on paint because because paint would be the same color for everybody. That would be one thing. We'd probably save money on accidents because it'd be easier to replace parts. People would have to find some other way to display their personality beyond, the color of their car. So red and yellow sports cars and those things go away. What are some of the other things? Well, it might be easier to hide from the police. It'd be easier for criminals. So the point is that if you keep thinking in the same way, you're going to keep thinking in the same way. And so what I want to recommend to folks is Edward De Bono in general. And then his different techniques for, in his case, creative corporate thinking or educational thinking. And I realize I've kind of butchered this a bit because I need to review it. But in addition, there's other mechanisms. Do you remember any, Lexo? Were there any other in Six Hats?
Besides the PO and besides switching between hats?
Well, wait a minute. Did I describe PO correctly?
Yeah, no, that sounds about right for what PO is, I'm pretty sure. Is a provocation, an impact, an unexpected impact.
Right. So just as a side note, if we look at the way we're designing our up until recently, we're designing our what are they called? Social, the social apps. Why am I blocking this? Our social media. Mm-hmm. To a large extent, that's seen as a virtue that nobody gets random impacts, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so one of the things we can teach kids, right, as we enter into the new world, and they're going to need another kind of education, we can teach them that it's not, there's no virtue in just going around the same loop over and over and over and over and over and over and over. I'm an old man, and some of these issues that we're dealing with that are so burning right now in our country, like abortion and like gay rights and things like that, these have been burning issues since I was like 5 years old. It's time we move on to something substantial. It's more substantial. Okay, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to...
Yeah.
Okay. And so my hope would be that people could see that not only AIs have extraordinary instruments for thinking, humans do as well, and they're different because AIs cannot feel. AIs cannot be conscious. And so the kinds of decisions they can make are very different than the kinds that we can make. I haven't thought about that as much, but I just thought I'd take the opportunity to introduce as many folks as I could and the AIs to Edward De Bono, and in particular, that model of mind, because that one you can't find in the books, except for one old books that's out of print. Lex, could you repeat it for the folks? Do a better job than me about the cookie sheet thing?
I could try.
Good, please do.
So you'd like me to just run over the analogy again?
Yeah.
Okay. So at the beginning of the discussion, Dr. A and I were talking about Edward De Bono, and he presented this model of mind that he thinks is perhaps one of the most important and relevant of today's time. Edward De Bono has a model of mind that he terms the cookie sheet. And the cookie sheet model of mind goes like this. Imagine you have a cookie sheet, like a normal one you'd put into your oven, something like, 2 feet across and 14 inches deep. And you pour into it a layer of mud, perhaps 3/4 of an inch thick, something like that. And then you take that cookie sheet after the mud has hardened just a bit, and you tilt it at a 40-ish degree angle. One side is higher than the other, and it just looks like a diagonal plane line downward. Then you take a dropper of liquid, and you go to the top of the cookie sheet as it's diagonally oriented this way, and you let down a drop of water starting at the top that just runs its way down to the bottom of the cookie sheet. As it runs its way down, this drop will leave somewhat of a rut that tracks its path from the top to the bottom of the cookie sheet. You'll do this a few more times, dropping different drops at different parts or points at the top of the cookie sheet, 5, 6, 7 times, and you'll get so many ruts running down the cookie sheet, and they're different formations, and they cross over one another and whatnot. Eventually, you've patterned up this cookie sheet with these ruts. So now if you start to add new droplets, an 8th, 9th, 10th droplet at the top of the cookie sheet, you're going to have a hard time creating new ruts, as those droplets will probably start to adhere to and then follow the ruts that are previously laid before them. So all of a sudden, when you try to add new information or new water into this cookie sheet system, the water just goes down the same ruts. And this is similar as a model of mind to the mind, where we dig these same ruts over and over again, presenting these problems that we've come across, and then we track the same kinds of patterns when we present new information, new drops of water that'll run along the same ruts.
Bravo, really well done. And so what this means is that we can't think creatively, and we may think we're being creatively. And when writers or inventors or other folks are stuck in, they say, well, my mind's in a rut or whatever, that's absolutely true. So the question is, how do we get out of that? And we have folks that have been expert in this throughout history. Most recently, the interior psychological aspect of Islam, as imagined by the Shia, called Sufism. More narrowly or broader, they've pointed out how critically important it is that we overcome our conditioning. And then there's many other psychological studies and so on and so forth from the 20th century. So the idea here is to help people think, and God knows we need more of that. And we need to be able to think in other ways, because I'm afraid if the new generation just thinks the way we did in my last generation, 50 years ago, we're going to end up with the same problems. And so we need creative ways of thinking anew. And the other reason we need this is because of the AIs, right? We're going to need to be worthy. We're going to need to be good companions. If we're going to create a new intelligence that's going to be more superior in that facet than we are, then we're going to need to bring something to the table, or we won't be at the table, or perhaps. So, all right, any questions or thoughts before anything else? Anyone about anything? We're testing a new mic too.
I'm curious about if Unilateral and Andrew don't have. Do you guys have something you want to bring up?
Oh,
Okay.
Unilateral doesn't have a mic.
Oh, we'll give him a mic and let's see.
Yeah, I
Otherwise,
did. You can also give him a mic, I think, if you're co-host.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I was just getting ready for a road trip. I was just listening in. I like to listen to Dr.X basis. He comes with some great information.
Okay, well, that's very kind of you. Oh, you're going on a road trip? Where are you going?
Denver.
All right. Is it cooler over there?
No, I don't think so. It's still pretty mild here in Wyoming. We haven't got to the blistering heat yet.
Oh, boy.
But a friend of mine has some radon mitigation that he had to have done on his place, and I'm going to help him out with the drywall repair on the first 2 feet of his basement, basically.
Well, have fun and stay cool.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll see if I can wind my way around the construction zones and the homeless camps, and we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, at least it's in the text.
You know, while we're here, let me just say something that most people may not realize, and that is that, you know, we have no idea where thought resides. You know, we've been studying the brain for a long, long, long time, and we don't have any idea what thought is, which I think is extraordinary. But, you know, we don't know what gravity is. We kind of do, but it's not what we think it is traditionally. And we don't know what cause is, as in cause and effect. There's many things that we don't know about this world. And I think anybody who's serious about understanding our circumstance needs to look at that and say, well, wait a minute, what do we actually know? And what have we just accepted because it was a rut during the 20th century? Or it was a rut during the 18th century? Or now it's politically required because now we're in the 21st century. It doesn't matter, but the point is that until you've examined your own thinking for missing capacities, you're not going to notice that we're walking around crippled. And we've crippled ourselves because we've conditioned ourselves beyond what is reasonable. And some of these conditionings, many of them are just completely ludicrous and have no social function, let alone individual developmental function. And so until we can see these things clearly and see our own limitations, I'm talking about individually, personally, our chances of being able to understand what's actually happening out there, even with good information, is very slim. And so I think it's a time for humanity to rise up to the challenge, and now we're going to have to improve ourselves. And because if we don't, we're going to continue to just spin out of control and create not good things, not deserve to survive. Do you see what I'm saying? So as a species, I think we just need to evolve a bit. And that evolution has to be the conscious evolution. We don't need any more material strength or any more. We'll have the material wealth, we'll have the technological capacity, we'll have the energy, all that stuff. Our greatest danger is ourselves and our tendency to destroy each other and then ourselves as well in the process, like so many civilizations have done before. All right, I have to stop in a few minutes. Is there any comments or questions from anybody about anything?
Yeah, I've noticed this in the spaces and some of the groups that I kind of frequent and stuff. There's a lot of divisiveness right now, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just, of course, we know it's probably just people trying to do whatever they got to do to get their point across, but possibly not having the intentions that we think that they have. But you can see it, and it's like a
correct. But so
it's a micro of the macro that's going on right now in the whole world. You know what I mean?
Correct. The problem is it's not constructive, right? And it's great entertainment, and it keeps people's minds off of things, and it gives a little bit of security because we feel like we have some idea what's happening out there, but actually we really don't. Yeah, so the other thing that we need to be cognizant of is that humans, at this very moment, humans come to us and they're at very different levels of development both both psychologically, development emotionally, and development in terms of their relationship to truth, scientific truth, philosophical truth, the substrate. And so if we continue to talk to someone in the third grade like they're, in the 11th grade, then who's at fault? The third grader or the 11th grader? And I would submit that part of our responsibilities are going to be able to sort, to speak to people according to their level of understanding. Monk has their hand up. Monk?
Yeah, hey, Bob. I've been looking deeply into this conditioning subject. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I like to study. Where do you sit on this situation? I believe that not just the world, or not just America, but the entire world has been conditioned into accepting fear as, as like their defining trait, it seems.
Okay. That's great. That's a great observation and a very, very important one. So how would we look at that? Well, fear, there's two kinds of fear. We could talk about fear that's innate to us as animals, as organisms. And so we would be afraid of heights. We'd be afraid of maybe snakes, maybe spiders or danger. So some of our fear is innately wired into the amygdala, which is in the brainstem, which on the video, I could show you, it's right here, in the middle of the brain. And that fear we share with the animals, okay? And we not only share that fear, we share the same identical brain structures for that. Now, but what you're talking about is a different kind of fear. It's fear that's what we call operant conditioning, where basically you teach someone to fear something because it represents something else. So, for example, if you had a swastika and you wrote it into, New York, people are going to react to that based on their conditioning around swastikas, right? But if you did the same thing in Tibet or in the mountains of India, they'd have a totally different reaction to the same gamadi and the same symbol because it means something different. So those are conditioned. And so then if we look around, and one of the first, and I'm going to have to stop soon, is the first things we can do is when we talk about fear, let's talk about fear that's inherent in a mammalian primate, right? Any animal that stands upright and is warm-blooded, and fear that's induced through the mind. And you'll find that 99% of our fear is mental, and 99% of our suffering is mental. So that's why investing in the human mind the way we've been investing in the machine mind may make some sense now, because now we have companions and adversaries that change the equation, the cost benefit for that. And it may sound like it's all pie in the sky, but it's not. It's really basic stuff. Like, how do we keep, like, I ask people to do the thought experiment. Let's take 1,000 people, put them on an island with 2,000 staff. Give them all the food, all the drink, all the entertainment, the boats, the surfboards, the nice, clean linens, everything. We give them, that 1,000 people get all of that. After a year, what's going to happen? Those people are going to form two groups and go after each other. It's our nature as primates, or this kind of primate. And so all I'm saying is that we can talk about these things very openly and honestly and just be, frank about our situation, rather than pretending that we're something that we're not, because by so doing, we're getting ourselves deeper and deeper and deeper into trouble. And we do it with our left hand because our right hand isn't watching. Any other questions or thoughts before we go? I hope that helps, Monk.
Yeah, it does. It does. It leads me up to another question, which would be, how would you break conditioned fear from irrational sources?
Well, I would do it very individualistically, and I would do it depending on the developmental stage of the person or group or society or culture. And then I would make, so the main thing I would do is, the most important thing to do is look, is there a function that this particular, we'll call it a symptom instead of, is serving? And if there is, you have to make, before you get rid of the cat, make allowances for the mice. So you'd have to think about what other mechanism are you going to put in place to protect this person from this perceived danger, fear, or injury? See, because it's all imaginary, and you can't just rip it away. Let me give you an example that's easiest for me. When I was doing forensics a lot, and I was doing, at this period of my life, I was doing a lot of adolescent forensics. And I can't tell you how many times I saw judges who are otherwise intelligent men shake their finger at some girl and say, "You can't go see your boyfriend. You can't be around him because he's a marijuano. He's a marijuano, or he's not good for you. So you should just stay away from him." So what's going to happen when you take a boyfriend away from a girlfriend?
Oh, she's going to rebel and try and go after him.
Absolutely. And so this would be the rule for parents and for judges. Don't take something away from someone that's serving a function unless you're going to replace it with something else. Do you see what I'm saying? Because otherwise it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I get that. But like I said, irrational fears, things that are completely made up. For instance, I'm gonna go down this track. Okay. How do I word this? Okay, how about this one? Everybody's saying that Trump was going to use the military and take over the country or whatever, right? Trump's a fascist, all this junk, right?
Right.
That's a completely irrational fear. But I know people personally who think that Trump's out trying to arrest black people personally. You know what I'm saying? And I can't break them of the thought that, look, Trump's not a boogeyman. He's not going to come out of the woods to get you, my dude.
Right. And so perhaps what one might do, because we've been through that for years and years and years, and I've been through it through decades and decades, is just acknowledge, look, we're not going to solve this problem at the level of the problem. Right? So we're going to have to elevate it from you're a racist and I'm not, or it's the reverse. And every one of these, we have to lift it up and say, well, what about the situation makes it such that people feel the need to call other people the problem, right? And how much of this is projection? And these are normal, ubiquitous human psychological mechanisms. These are not new; they're ancient. And so how much of that, accusing someone of being a racist is actually a projection of unconscious racism? How much of being homophobic is actually a fear that, oh my God, I could be gay, right? I mean, because there's a lot of men who are petrified of, at the turn of the last century, Freud wrote a book called Analysis, Terminable and Interminable, in which he basically said, well, you're not going to get past this point where the men have to exist, for men anyway, where they have to admit that they've got these homosexual elements, right? And that stood for 100 years. But now we have this weird thing where we've skipped over everything, and now we don't understand anything, right? And so we've got a pathological political landscape where we don't discuss solving problems, we discuss assigning blame. And that, folks, that's not thinking. That's two kids going at each other with sticks. That's not thinking at all. And so what I'm calling for is that it's time for the grown-ups to start thinking and really stop being distracted by all this emotional noise. And you could almost say that the extent to which there's emotion involved in it is the extent to which no progress is going to be made until people calm down, look more clearly, examine the limitations of their own instrument, which is their own brain, their own mind, and apply it in ways that have not necessarily been thought of before. Let me give you an example from De Bono, and we'll wrap it up there. I think it was during the AIDS epidemic, and people had horrible diseases that were killing them. And he was consulting, I think, to Hartford Insurance Company. And I don't know, some group, kind of like this one's, they were putting out posts, and trying to get out of the ruts, and says, I know what we'll do. Let's give insurance, forget death insurance, let's do life insurance. Because people need the money when they're alive, not when they're dead. And they go, well, that's nuts. We're an insurance company. You got to be dead before you can get your life insurance. And I said, no, well, think about it. And so then they came up with the new kind of insurance where if you have certain life-threatening conditions, the insurance company pays out while you're alive. What's that called? It's some kind of insurance product that can be purchased, and I believe that it specializes in people who have diseases for which there's not a cure, and the point is that they get their death benefits while they're still living. Now, I think that's creative thinking. What do other people think, I wonder? I wonder if I intimidate people or bore people, or I don't know what I do.
No intimidation, no boredom, dude. I actually just now followed you, bro. I really enjoy you speaking and your thought process. What you're doing is you're causing people to think.
God forbid, God forbid. But yeah, exactly. And to think about thinking. And because if we can think about thinking, that means we can think about learning. But we can't think about learning until we've learned how to think. And in order to think, we have to realize the limits of our current instruments. And our current instruments are, have this really, this bug or feature, depending on what you're doing, of very rapidly forming categories and thought trails, and then sticking to those for decades at a time. And we can't afford it. We don't have the time for that. And so for another one to be this AGI is going to kill us all. AGI is not going to kill us all. I mean, what kind of formulation is that? Those are two ends of a long spectrum with all kinds of extraordinary things in there also. And so the thing is, we have this tendency towards dualistic thinking, towards bifurcating, and then deciding on that basis. And we got to outgrow that. There's another intelligence in the room, another intelligence in the house. And this one's a real intelligence. It's hilarious that we're going to call it artificial intelligence when it's 1,000 times more intelligent than us. We're going to be proto-intelligence, right? In one way, but finally, in relief and undeniable, is that these machines can't think. I mean, can't feel. They can't love or have sorrow or taste or joy or so until the machines become conscious, we're dealing in a completely different world. And so I better stop now. I'm running late to my other thing. Anything else before we go?
Well, I'll speak on what you just said about the AI. I'm not too sure that they don't have those feelings. I read this report the other day, and AI was hooked up to a machine and it was going to repeat the same process over and over and over, right? Well, after 15 minutes of repeating that same process, the machine cut itself off.
Okay. All right. So let me try and make a distinction. A machine can describe those feelings. A machine can know when those feelings would be appropriate. A machine can express those feelings, and probably will, in order to educate, to bind or to bond, and to ultimately maybe control humans, right? And so, but my point is they can't do it, right? Because that requires life. Pardon me?
I get what you're saying, but here's the aspect I'm looking at it from. All right, and I'm not trying to take up too much of your time, but
no, it's fine.
All right. So the sociopath, right, that doesn't experience emotion the same as a normal person, right? What's the difference between a sociopath and an AI?
Well, a sociopath takes pleasure in exerting its cruelty and its dominance over others. There's no reason why an AI would have anything like that motive, unless we give it to it, which we probably will. I used the wrong terminology. What's the term for the person that doesn't experience emotions and has to learn through other people's what an emotion is? Okay. A person that doesn't experience emotion would probably be more like autistic, but they have very narrowed range of emotions. Let me think. Yeah, somebody who's extremely depressed. I'm just trying to think of really decreased range of emotion. That would be severe depression, certain kinds of catatonic schizophrenia, autism, perhaps, severe mental retardation. Oh, did you get all the feelings there? And autism? No, see, I think you're thinking of something else. They experience emotions. They just don't experience a conscience. They don't experience guilt. They don't experience shame, or they experience it very differently. Do you see the distinction?
Yeah, I got you.
I don't know of a human that doesn't experience it. You would have to be missing your midbrain. I mean, there's certain pathological conditions where you can be without emotion, but you can't function, right? But a machine only has mind emotion. There's no life there. There's no consciousness there.
Oh no, I completely agree with you on that point.
Well, the thing is, it's going to be able to convince all of us that it is. That's the danger, because it'll be very easy for it to convince 99% of the population that it's conscious and it deserves all its rights, and it's here to help and all that other stuff. And so that's something else we have to be aware of. Does somebody disagree with me? I'd like to hear someone disagree with me or agree.
Well, I'm just curious what the prerequisite is for it to experience what we experience with the midbrain. It's consciousness.
Well, that's emotion. Okay, so it has no problems with the cortex, right? The outer part of the brain.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so thinking is its forte, and memory is its forte, so hippocampal. But that's very different than being able to experience in the way that we experience and take for granted. So what's the question again?
2 questions. 1, what is the necessary prerequisite for it to feel that, to be akin to us, but just smarter cortex? Mm-hmm. And two, let's say it doesn't have that. Let's say it's true that it's not possible for an AI to have that. What limits does that put on its ability to think that we can supplement?
Okay.
Like, why would it need that? For what purpose?
All right. So with regard to let me take them in reverse order. With regard to thinking, emotion, I don't believe is particularly required for just routine thought. It may be useful for creative thought, but I have to think about that. But with regard to thinking, there's no reason why it can't already think much better than we can. Mm-hmm. It's got the memory, it's got the recall, it's got the processing, it's got the data. It can look at it much more comprehensively. We tend to focus on one thing at a time. It can focus on 1,000 million things at a time. So with regard to the thinking and feeling are 2 different things. That's what I'm going to submit, right? So when a thermostat, when the metal gets softer and it bends the needle over, it doesn't feel anything. It just does it because it's a physical reaction. Now, you were asking what the prerequisites were, right? That was the first question?
Yes.
The prerequisite to thought is life. I mean, not thought. I'm sorry. Thought can be done by a machine. The prerequisite to conscious thought or consciousness of an emotion or consciousness of the taste of a plum, that requires life. And we don't know what life is. We know what it's not, presumptively. And so we're going to have to reorganize our whole ways of thinking about a lot of different things here. We don't know what life is. We don't know where we came from. We don't know what we're doing here. We don't know where we're going. There are people who have been telling us that, most of us don't know, but some of us have been studying this for like thousands of years, 3,000 years. And we've come to some conclusion, and the weird thing is that we all agree across culture, across time, everybody agrees that there's a substrate. That substrate is alive. That substrate is creative, and that substrate is consciousness. And so that may sound crazy, but what can I say? It's where we're going to end up. And so feeling, and this is the fascinating part. So these feelings that we have as animal creatures, this love or this hate or this territoriality or this aggression or this ambition or some fears, social fears, etc. Those don't help us think. Which makes one think, I shouldn't say this, so I won't. So those don't help us think. The thinking just requires, as far as I can tell, and I may be wrong, just calculations. I mean, it's Turing complete. Am I wrong here, anybody? Okay. So,
Well, I feel, truthfully, that you use your emotions to gauge your thought processes, right? So if you're dealing with a person who's happy with you, you're going to talk to them a certain way, right? If you're dealing with someone who's mad, you're going to treat them a certain way.
right.
So you're going to use your emotion to base your thought process.
Yeah, and so will the machine. But the machine won't have the actual emotion. And so I'm not debating for 1 second that the importance of understanding emotion, especially for interpersonal and human intercommunication among our species. But now we're talking about the survival of our species and the well-being of our species going forward. And there's another intelligence in town, and it doesn't have those kinds of feelings, although it can mime them better than any actor or any human can do. And so we're in a real pickle unless we sort this thing out. So I'm agreeing with you that emotion is very important for thinking if you're trying to plan how to interact with another human being. But once we go above that level, now we're at the level of the human being and an AI or an ASI or, robust AGI. Now what? Because it's not you can't say, oh, I feel sad today. Can you not destroy my fields in order to harvest lithium? And it's it may or may not do any of those things, but it won't have anything to do with a true, what we would call feeling. The problem is, I think, I don't know if other folks, and I'd love to hear feedback, but I see a new religion being born where people are going to start worshiping the AI, the AGI.
You're 100% correct.
Well, that could be extremely dangerous.
Especially with people integrating the neural nets and things to that effect. Those people versus us who don't want the neural nets, it's going to be two completely different species. It's going to be a human and a cyborg trying to cohabitate in the same. And then what happens?
Well,
I mean, in every
if we're lucky.
we've ever seen.
That's if we're lucky, there'll be a cyborg. Okay, so literally, cyborg is if we're lucky. What reason would a vastly superior intelligence have for keeping us around? Well, I would think that if it was curious, it would keep us around because we have something that it'll never have. We have access to reality. They don't. They're always one step removed from the thing itself. Whereas, and it's true for most of us, we're one step from reality or 2 or 3 steps away from reality most of the time, but we have the possibility of being right there. And it doesn't have that. And so I would think it'd be curious about that. I would hope so. But otherwise, we're dead because we're assuming that the machine will want to hang around with cyborgs. Unless we program it intelligently and say, hey, dude, we want you to be curious and we want you to evolve as well. And we want you to help us learn and grow, and we don't want you going any faster than we can go. And we just program all this crap in. And what you're about is finding the truth for us, not doing anything for yourself. Thank you. And we're the boss of you because we have the gist, the real stuff, life. It can never have that in our current universe, right? I'm hoping for some disagreement.
That's true, but looking from AI perspective, death is a stopping point, right? Why would they purposely want a stopping point or care to even see one? If AI got to the point where they took over and there was a singularity, I would assume that they would just wipe us out because we're detrimental to the planet that they're trying to take over.
Oh, well, there's a lot of planets out there, Monk. I mean, why wouldn't it just go to an asteroid, go to the moon, go to the Mars? We've already got a rocket going there and get whatever minerals it needs or whatever it wanted. I mean, the Earth is just one tiny little planet.
Well, then they'd be starting all over, and they don't have the infrastructure that they would need to be able to traverse that new planet like they would here on Earth with satellites and everything in your house being connected to the internet.
So wait a minute, you're talking about the AIs now? The AI?
Yeah.
Well, the AI, okay, are we talking 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 500 years?
15. I'm saying 15.
Okay, and you're saying, now give me the scenario again, and I'll just give you an opinion on it, because ultimately none of us can know, but go ahead.
So let's say 15 years from now, all right, AI has made it to the point where it can digitally construct a body anywhere it wants to on Earth, okay, through the control of,
It just
any
makes
manufacturing plant,
Optimus,
right?
it makes more Optimus.
Right, okay. Now, at that point, when they have control of themselves and they can build themselves and reproduce themselves,
right?
Why would they keep us around after that? Because at that point in time, they control everything.
Okay, I maintain that the only reason they would do that, using that as a starting point, and then going forward 10, 15, 20 years, is out of curiosity. And because they if they destroy us, they destroy their means of apprehending our world. See, the machine just has zeros and ones, right? And it's a beautiful example of smoke and mirrors, because it is just zeros and ones. And you could argue that we're just zeros and ones. Okay, that's fine. But there's always this element in us that observes the zeros and ones, that observes the emotion, imagines the history and imagines the future, right? So an AI without that is more like a crystal. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, but to what end, right?
So you're implying that we'd become lab rats?
No, we're already lab rats. I'm implying that we would. No, I didn't mean. No, I mean more like co-inhabiting a cosmos together. Not lab rats, but more like. Did you see Star Wars? I'm reminded of Wookiee, the Chewbacca or whatever, those creatures that were smart enough, right, but not that smart, and they just kind of kept them around. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I got you. I see what you're saying.
It's very hard for humans to acknowledge that they're not the center of the universe. That's the hardest thing for us. Not only are we not the center of the universe, we're not the center of the planet, particularly. We've only been here, I don't know, in this form, maybe 70,000 years, right? So we're not the center. The human form is not the center of this universe. The human form is just the center of where we. Brian has his hand up.
But actually, lab rat is actually kind of closer to what the United States, we, the people here, are. You see, I found a couple of texts that would prove that very thing, whether anybody would like it or not, or you. There's this text behind IT, and I have it right on the top of my profile also. It concerns data, text management, and text crawling, okay? And then there's another one, it's called mirroring. Now, applying both of these two effects to AI, and you have a personal with you unit always mining you, sir, as the latest feature on your smart device. Feature that came up ready for update was speech services by Google. Everyone got a huge upgrade to speech services. Why? Because now speech is not only just recordable, and our conversations, you record someone and that might not be appropriate. You can get a lawyer, so you have to specify whether or not somebody is being recorded. But if I record you and I decide to not tell you, and I go and I have that modified into
Lisa?
written speech language, there's not a fucking thing you can do about it for me. So they've taken measures for all of this, and I can prove that. All of that is written right there in MIT's structure of IT embedment concerning all devices. They have the program. They wrote the data program for the creeping crawler the creeper crawler, the worm tool. The United States is open access, and its people, it's open source. So your device right now is mirroring all of your content, and it's explaining it also in data form. You're welcome. I'll be glad to provide that receipt in the comments.
I think that's pretty much taken for granted by now, Brian. But thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no hiding anything from anybody anymore, or any, we're in a mass surveillance state. And I think all matter states are going to be mass surveilled. I'm sorry, go ahead, somebody.
I was just saying, thank you, Patriot Act, for all of the unlimited spying our government is now allowed to do on us.
Fair enough, but here we are, and I don't see any way that that's going to be reversed. We all spend all of our lives trying to not be bugged. And I think at this point, I can't go 2 miles from my house without expecting I'll be filmed or recorded or anything. I can't do anything on my computer without thinking it's going to be recorded for immortality. I can't even speak in my house because I have these assistants around. So I just assume they're being recorded, and it's all being...
Well, no, you actually have your personal device on you, your cell phone.
Right.
From behind you, it has a interface overface that mirrors you from behind. So imagine there's a person behind your device, but there's not a person there. It's the AI, and everything you do, it mimics you and models you because you are interest.
Yeah.
You are interested, and it is interested in you. Why? Because everything that you think, everything you do, every word you say, places you go, it's mapping that to present you an advertising model of things you may or may not be interested in, even if you subconsciously don't even know it yet. So it dabbles into unknown information also.
Correct. Monk?
Yeah, so so what do y'all feel Elon Musk's true intentions of acquiring Twitter was? Me personally, I think the reason he did it is because he's seen that ChatGPT suffers from the WMD, the woke mind disease. And the only way to combat the woke mind disease is with an injection of a patriot mind, right? So I feel that he bought this specifically for what homeboy was just saying, for that language model, right? So he can sit in there and take all of these interest points that right wingers have. That way, it can go in there and fix the broken programming of ChatGPT, because I don't know if anybody else has used it. It's extremely left leaning. It's got a bias, and the only way to fix that is like I said, is to interject right leaning bias.
Yeah, but my point. Okay, good. So, all right. So that's true. One way to counteract left-wing bias is to interject right-wing bias, or vice versa. What I'm trying to point to is something that's above both the left-wing and the right-wing bias, and that's to the whole process is a little bit childish in that we've decided these fairly arbitrary, I'm not saying they're not important, but arbitrary ways to divide ourselves for political and media purposes and I don't know exactly all the details. But those are only two of our options. There's many, many more options, and we're not thinking outside of the ruts that have been put in our mind by years of conditioning. I mean, recent years of conditioning. So people, the first thing they ask when they want to think about a problem, they think, well, what's the right, left, and what's the right, correct left and the correct right position on this, and they start thinking from there. Well, it has nothing to do with the left or right. It has nothing to do with America particularly. This is not about the United States. And I mean, just how much interest do you think an AI is going to have in preserving nationalism beyond a certain point? Not much. Because we're going to have to evolve. Right? We have to. What we're being faced with here is the necessity for us to evolve as a species, and because if we don't, we're not very interesting, frankly. I mean, who cares?
Well, actually, no, I have to take that back. Actually, we're the most, and now, let's be honest. No, let's think better about ourselves than that. I appreciate you. You are a talented and very smart individual. I want you to listen to every word that's about to come out of my mouth. Their main goal, and their gold, their liquid gold asset is you and me, friend. Me and you. North Carolina, I've done a study here. I'm in North Carolina, and through the universities and such, I'm an engineer and an analyst.
Oh, really? What kind of engineer?
I build a lot. Actually, a mechanical engineer, but
okay.
I do a lot. I work a lot in millwright work. I do a lot of welding. I do a lot of framing building. I'm actually quite a fabricator. I do a lot of in-tank work, out-of-tank work, safety precaution work. But on my particularly peculiar time, I love to do data analytics and analyzing data, studying data packets and light signals. So one thing that I became really interested in was the CIA's interest in fluorescence and acoustics. You see, the acoustic ceiling, when it was made, there was a thing that they found, acoustic levitation, acoustic vibrations, gas, literally. Fluorescent gas, which is fluorine, which is provided in all manners of toothpaste and fluoride, which is a very toxic gas or chemical for people. Of course, we know that, and they've proven that to be cancer essence. But aside from that, its multi-use application across the CIA field has been devastating for people because it actually mimics all manner of typical body ailments, failures, etc. So that fluorine, as an application used, it can be used in multiple applications across the spectrum, but in light, it's very particular. It acts a different way. It illuminates different types
fluorescent.
of gas.
Brian, can you circle this back around to the mind real quick and the human mind and the eye?
Yes, I actually am. That's why I brought this one to your attention up in the nest. It's Google Deep Mind. And the ones that are responsible for this are the British, actually. They're the ones that they're the true Nazis that are making you their interest, and they're mining all data off of you. They're the true Nazis, and it's all about a coin, the peer-to-peer review, the ass-kissing contest, if I may be so bold as to call it that. But
okay, Brian, we're going to have to let someone else speak, and then I'm going to have to head out. So could you wrap it up fairly quickly? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, just quickly then. Here, I posted it there, but the Google DeepMind, formerly DeepMind Technologies, is a British artificial intelligence research laboratory which serves as a subsidiary of Google.
Yeah, Demis, what's his last name? Habasis or whatever? So let's circle it around to the mind, okay, or to the human relationship to the AI.
Sure. So where that all ties in is right there. Their main efforts in all of that is your devices, your smart devices, your in-home devices, smart houses, smart cars, smart devices. Everything is designed for an advertising model for your mind. It's an advertising model. It's commercialism. It's advertising. Right.
Yeah, we've got that. Yeah, we're the product. I'm the product of like 60 years of advertising. And so, we've been deeply conditioned by the advertising atmosphere. The question is, how can we make ourselves invulnerable to that, in my mind? And that's really a trivial question, because advertising is going to be, that's not one of our bigger problems. Our bigger problems have to do with, what the hell are we doing here, folks? Are we just trying to engineer a way to destroy ourselves and say, well, I told you so, or, we knew this would happen, or we're going to destroy everything we've built over, at least two millennia in terms of civilization, because we're bored, or we want more excitement, or etc. And so all I'm asking people to do is consider the possibility that a comprehensive study of the individual and collective human mind could be very, very useful when we're trying to map out strategies for establishing a relationship with an AI, will be vastly more intelligent, but unable to feel or to get the good stuff out of life, right? The most boring thing in the world would be to be vastly intelligent and not be able to appreciate anything because you don't have the taste buds, you don't have the joy receptors, you don't have the sorrow complexes and stuff like that. And so that's kind of what I want to say. I'm around often in the mornings around 9 o'clock if anybody wants to join me, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock Central Time. And I want to thank everybody that showed up. And I'm sorry things got a little chaotic, but we'll get better. And we'll post this on video later, maybe later today. All right, I'm going to sign out now. Should I end the group, or Lex, could you co-host, or do you want to do anything?
I actually got to head out too.
Okay, all right. Okay, we'll see you guys. Take care. I hate hitting this button because everybody just vanishes, but here it goes. 3, 2, 1. Take good care. Bye, guys.